The Stormwolf build is one of the fastest and the strongest Druid build in the game, and it is super efficient and super useful for farming anything from helltides to dungeons to even pushing high nightmare dungeons. This thing can do it all. There's definitely a reason that it's the meta right now. There are a couple of variations to Stormwolves, from using the Crone Staff to Bulwark Explosions, even Lightning Storm. So there are definitely a lot of options here, but this one is the most efficient for running through dungeons, running through helltides, getting a ton of aberrant cinders and gear super fast. As you can see here, we are actually at 200% movement speed actively, so that is the max movement speed in the game, and it is just a fast build. The gameplay for this is to pop your ultimate Grizzly Rage, run into a big crowd, and you're also super tanky during this. I'm on a hardcore character and have not died with this build, of course, and I'm just running through, sending a bunch of tornadoes, killing everyone, and continuing on my way. This way, I get a bunch of kills, I come back, pick it up, and I'm always resetting my cooldowns with my ultimate based on my attack. So the more attacks per second, the faster your ultimate will come down, because we're using Lucky Hit for nature magic abilities to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate. So that is really key for this build. As you can see with the footage here, we're just getting a bunch of kills, running through them. Don't even worry about it. Everyone dies really quickly. This build is far from being finalized. There is a lot of damage that I can still add to it. I recently switched from the pulverized build to this, as it is more meta, more fun, more quick, and it's very effective. Movement speed is actually one of the most underrated stats in ARPGs like Diablo. If you have enough damage like this build does give you, you'll be able to mow through mobs way higher level than you. Clear helltides, get your aberrant cinders, you'll get your gear, get a ton of loot, and be able to keep pushing. So this is a great farming build, as well as a pushing build, as well as just a general overall build. This does a ton of damage. Apparently not too great in PvP because those tornadoes are a bit slow, but this is good for everything else. This is a hardcore character. I've never been in PvP and I'm level 100, so definitely not worried about that. But this is great. You can kill mobs super quick, you can kill bosses super quick, go through elites, and the faster your attack speed is and higher lucky hit chance you have, the more often you can have your Grizzly Rage up permanently, keeping you fully strong. So for this build to work, we have to focus on a few things, but let's go over the items first. Okay, so this one required, obviously, is Tempest Roar. I think a lot of people are looking for this item. Essentially, what this does is makes your storm skills also werewolf skills. So you can actually use a lightning or tornado spell, and you will be a werewolf, get all the buffs from being a werewolf, as well as being able to get extra damage multipliers for being a werewolf. So this is required. This also gives you some damage while shapeshifted, which is great. Crit damage, which is good. Max spirit is helpful. And poison resistance, which we don't care about, but it slightly helps. Luckily, I have a decent roll here for the lucky hit to grant more spirit, so 24%. There's a lot of ways to develop spirit back in this build. So when you're in Grizzly Rage, you will not run out, almost guaranteed. And when you're out of Grizzly Rage, you can pretty much keep your spirit up as well, pretty often. Currently have Mad Wolf's Glee. This just helps for pushing to a degree. You get slight more damage as you get 2 ranks to all werewolf skills, and obviously now your main damage dealers are werewolf skills. You also get some extra movement speed, which is huge for me, and then damage reduction for enemies that are poisoned. And we will apply poison to all enemies we attack, and then some physical damage, which also applies to our attacks, which are physical. So this is a really good pushing chest plate. But once you want to even push even higher into the nightmare dungeons and higher tiers, then you're going to want to get a normal chest plate with a defensive aspect on it. So the 2 main defensive aspects you might run are the gain 15% damage reduction while shapeshifted into a werewolf. We're currently running that on our legs, and the aspect of disobedience. So if I were to update my chest plate with another one, I'm just waiting till I get a good roll, then I will be adding disobedience to that. Actually, disobedience is likely better than this 15% damage reduction, but at least this way, if I'm just standing around, I still have that resistance and I don't have to be attacking. So next up, we'll take these gloves, which we're taking core skills increase damage based on your fortify. I have a pretty low roll here. I actually have another one here with slightly better, 26%. But 40% is obviously the goal, and that should be multiplicative, so it's a good amount of damage. Obviously here you can see that these gloves are not meant for this build. I have ranks of pulverized, which was actually meant for my old build, but we have all stats, attack speed, and crit chance. What I would suggest here are crit chance, attack speed, lucky hit chance, and then the 4th can be ranks to tornado for damage. We can get all stats on other items. Your pants, you're going to want to have all defensive skills, so damage reduction from close, and fortified, and total armor. Total armor is very strong. I only have 6.5%, not too great. It's okay for now. And then max life is also pretty helpful. You can also go for 3 damage reductions and armor, but I would definitely stick to making sure armor is on the items. Overall, you're going to want to have some good max life at your highest level. So at level 100, I would say like 14,000 is a good minimum, especially for hardcore and for tanking high nightmare dungeons. However, you can still run a lot in World Tier 4. You can go through a lot of content with the full attack build, so just run through everything, and this will work quite well. for boots. So you can take anything for the top, 3 evades or cooldown reduction. So this one actually pretty much you hit an attack, you get a free evade. It's really good, really efficient, especially when running through mobs. So I definitely like this one for pushing mobs and clearing dungeons really quick. I also have damage reduction while injured, so this is a pretty good thing if you're gonna go really low health. We have quite a bit of damage reduction while injured. So we have currently 52%. I used to have almost 70%, so it's pretty much like a cheat death. But yeah, it's a pretty helpful stat. You don't want to prioritize it, obviously, because it's just kind of wasted unless you're almost dying. But it's a good protection, especially in hardcore, so definitely something to consider. We also have movement speed, fortified generation. Fortified generation, I would possibly move out for a total armor or another damage reduction. So for boots, I would prefer to get damage reduction instead of fortified generation. We still get a lot of fortify regardless. And then for the aspect, we are taking Ghostwalker to get increased movement speed as well, especially when being unstoppable and afterwards. So this is one of the few builds, all of these builds that rely on Earthen Might and Lucky Hit Chance. We are essentially taking a one-handed weapon for that attack speed buff because... So the goal here is to combine Lucky Hit Chance with attack speed for the highest chance of Lucky Hit proccing. And Earthen Might is very effective with proccing, but more importantly is the Calm Before the Storm. This is a lucky hit, and this helps you get your ultimate back. So the faster you can get your ultimate back, then the more effective your build will be. You want this ultimate up to be pretty much up nonstop. So that's why we prioritize attack speed and lucky hit chance, and then crit chance to a degree afterwards. I actually have a lot more crit chance than I need. Currently I'm at 44%, which is slightly high. I would say like 35 to 40 is good. There's no harm with higher crit chance, but the point is we'll be hitting Earthen Might a lot, so that's 100% crit chance. So you don't want to waste valuable stats in crit chance, but you do need a little bit, and it actually does help you proc Earthen Might as well. For the aspect on the weapon, we are taking critical strikes with core skills, increase our attack speed. So we'll have increased attack speed. We have willpower, damage to crowd control enemies, damage to close, and core skill damage. I have overpower damage here as it is a mace. So if I get an axe of some sort with damage to healthy, that's also pretty good. Overpower damage is not really focused on too much with this build, and it doesn't hit too often, but sometimes it does hit, and it does hit pretty good. For our amulet, this one we are taking now Grizzly Rage now shapeshift you into a dire werewolf. This one's really important in the amulet. As you can see here, we're getting 75% spirit cost reduction, which is huge. So you'll never run out of spirit, and you can spam those tornadoes, which are quite high spirit. They're actually more than pulverize, but obviously with the werewolf build, the tornado works a lot better. And we also get 38% movement speed. That ensures that we are always getting a crazy amount of movement speed. But it really shows when you pop your ultimate, it really stacks up. Then we have damage while shapeshifted, damage reduction, and damage reduction while injured. I would also stack maybe some cooldown reduction on the amulet because that's a good drop there. But base damage reduction is really good there. I have storm skill cooldown reduction on this. That is a waste for me. It's okay for hurricane and stuff, but flat cooldown would be a lot better and help you get your ultimate back. On the rings are typically offensive aspects as well as health. We have lucky hit chance, crit chance, physical damage, and damage to slow. So those are all offensive. Tornado is actually physical damage, so it does benefit from this. So this is okay. We're also taking another lucky hit chance, damage to close, physical, and crit chance. So we have damage to close on one and damage to slowed on one. So they're very similar rings, and they both do a lot of damage. For the aspects, we're taking duration of Grizzly Rage is increased by 5 seconds. Well, 4 in this case, but 5 is the best. And the most important part of this build is the fact that we are now stacking our crit damage. So similar to our pulverized build, we will be stacking that crit damage up to 990%, which is huge. So every crit, you get 10% damage. And with this tornado build, you get a ton of hits, a ton of attack speed. And that's why the attack speed is so important, especially in this build. And then we are taking Earthen Might is also applied from our storm skills. As this is a storm/Nado build, we need to make sure that it can proc Earthen Might and then start critting from there. Then on our totem, we are taking the tornado will seek up to 3 enemies. So at least 1 or 2 is obviously required for this to be effective because then it will be following the enemies and constantly hitting them. We have attack speed. This one just has basic skill attack speed. Definitely can be re-rolled. It's just really expensive on this one. Then we have cooldown reduction, very important. Lucky hit chance, also very important. And then damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned. And we are be-poisoning. So we have over 23% cooldown reduction on this, which is really effective. This is a really good item. For the gems, I typically take damage reduction while fortified. That one's pretty good. For gems, we are taking armor with the skulls, very important. And for damage, we are taking the emeralds for vulnerable damage, because now we are applying vulnerable quite a lot, especially with that exploit glyph. Let's go over our skills. We're taking Storm Strike. I get these extra points because of our Mad Wolf's Glee. We get +2 ranks to werewolf skills, and all of our skills are now werewolf skills. So we have this, and we have the chance to immobilize. You need that to get to the next tree. Then we're maxing out Tornado, and then we are taking the Raging Tornado for the chance for vulnerable enemies, because you might not kill bosses or elites in the first 3 seconds from exploit. We're also going to be taking Predatory Instinct for close damage and Digitigrade Gate for 9% more movement speed. We want to make sure we're, really strong with movement speed. Then we're also going to take Heart of the Wild and Wild Impulses for 15% more damage. with our tornado. Then for our defensive aspects, we're going to take Cyclone Armor, we're going to take Enhanced and Preserving for the extra damage resistance. This focuses a lot on damage resistance as well, so it is super strong and tanky. And once you pop that Grizzly Rage and get those crit damage stacks, your damage is also crazy insane. This is actually a very similar build to the one Druid player who's from China, who actually beat a level 100 Nightmare Dungeon, literally level 154 enemies, and he was able to do that with this build. We're also going to take Ancestral Fortitude and Vigilance for another 15% damage reduction after popping a defensive skill. As you can see here, we have 2. So we're also taking Blood Howl to get your life back. You also get the cooldowns down really quickly, especially with killing mobs. Then you get attack speed as well with Preserving Blood Howl. So that's huge. We're definitely focusing on attacking as fast as possible. Then we're taking Hurricane. The main reason we're taking this is to reduce enemy damage. So as you can see here, enemies affected by Hurricane deal 20% less damage, and they're also slowed. Slow debuff is really good for damage modifiers as well, and we also get some tankiness from it, and it does a little bit of damage. And then we're also taking Elemental Exposure. We're stacking that up so that more chances to make enemies vulnerable, and then Endless Tempest to make Hurricane last 15% longer, so that there is minimal amount of downtime. Then we're going to take Neurotoxin, 1 point here. This actually helps enemies also be slowed, but more importantly, it allows us to get into the Envenom tree. Poison enemies take 30% more crit strike damage. Another important point here is if you can get Envenom on your amulet, that's the only place where you can get Envenom. Plus 3 ranks to Envenom would be huge there. That's literally another 30% multiplier to your crit damage. That doesn't get added to your 990%, for example. We're also taking 1 point in Toxic Claws. That way, your tornadoes will apply the poison, and all of the poison buffs and debuffs, such as damage reduction while poisoned, and extra damage to poison enemies will be applied. Next up, we're going to take Defiance for 12% more damage with our Tornado, as that is a nature magic skill. We're going to take 3 points here for increased amount of Fortify, and a chance to get a little bit of Fortify back when getting hit. Then we're going to take Grizzly Rage, of course. This is the main part of this build, and we're going to take both nodes here, and then obviously Earthen Might. So now our Storm skills can proc Earthen Might, and you're off to the races. And for our Spirit Wounds, we're just going to take 10% damage reduction from elites. Here I have 5% increased crit strike. I'm actually might change that to max life or even attack speed. Unless I'm worried about my health, I'll take that 10% max life. That'll give me 15.3 versus 14. That's actually quite huge. So you can use that if you are not hardcore. If you're hardcore, take the 10% max life maybe, or you can take the 10% attack speed. We're also going to take Calamity for that extended ultimate duration, of course. And then we are going to take both Calm Before the Storm as well as Masochistic. Every single crit you hit will be healing you for 422 in my case. That is insane. So you can heal a ton of health in this, and it's just a great way to tank. So as you can see here in my stats, we have just a little bit of crit strike damage, but this, when popped with Grizzly Rage, stacks up like crazy. So you don't need a ton of base crit damage. This 44% crit chance is actually really helpful because even if you didn't proc Earthen Might, you'd still be hitting a ton of crits and get that crit damage up, and eventually Earthen Might will still proc. Then we definitely want to maximize vulnerable damage as well. So put in as much damage to vulnerable as you can. Most of this damage is coming from the exploit glyph. Overpower, that's just part of the base build. We will drop this a little bit when swapping out this mace, for example, and some other things, but it might proc here and there. And then we have some general bonuses to all damage, crowd control enemies, slowed, close, while fortified, while shapeshifted, while werewolf. All of these will be applying, as well as damage with physical, damage with core, and storm, and werewolf. All of these will fall under your tornado damage. It really stacks damage really well. So generally, you want to stack armor for defense and damage reduction aspects. So damage reduction from close, damage reduction from poisoned, and reduction from vulnerable. We are always going to be making enemies vulnerable, poisoned, and should be close generally. A lot of the times, the range of close is actually bigger than you might think. So someone did mention the radius of slightly bigger than this waypoint is actually the close range. So if you just run into a mob, spam some tornadoes, pop your buffs, all your skills, you actually can tank quite a bit. So for our Paragons, I actually couldn't fully respec my board. However, I took most of them of the important stuff. So let's go over that. Especially since I'm a hardcore character, I care a lot about life and armor, so I definitely focus on that. But you're always going to want to take this 20% damage and 4% max life. That is huge. So you're actually going to start off with the board on both sides because you get max life and armor as well. Come here for our first glyph, and I use exploit here because we can fit our 25 dexterity here. So I got that to make enemies vulnerable. Then we follow up here, go to Impel, get 20% damage. Our first board is for Inner Beast, so that is for shapeshifting. This one isn't as important, but I like it here because I get to stack this armor, max life, armor, and attack speed and damage. So those are really just base stats that are really nice to have, especially in hardcore, and that's why I took it. It does make it kind of harder to get other really important damaging boards out. So there is one that I am missing, which I'll mention as well, which you should try to add if you can. Then I went up here to the Constricting Tendrils board. This one helps us get more max life and some damage with, crowd control enemies and our nature magic skills. And then for this, we're taking Territorial because we get damage reduction against close enemies, which is really important. Our next board is Thunderstruck. So we get Storm Skills deal 30% increased crit damage against vulnerable or immobilized enemies. We're taking Outmatch in here. This one is to grant bonus experience to all rare nodes. I took this because since I'm hardcore, damage reduction is really important. And this one here gives us damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. So that actually gives us 15.6% from this guy. We also get 40% storm skill damage. So that's quite effective total. Quite a bit of extra damage reduction that I'm getting. The next board is Lust for Carnage. This one is critical strikes with werewolf skills, restores 2 spirit. A lot of people will take this as their first board. Pretty important. We get extra spirit. Yeah, and we get a lot of werewolf damage. And then on this one, I threw the werewolf glyph as well. So extra damage reduction while in werewolf form. Then lastly, we're going to just come here to the Ancestral Guidance board. We're just going to kind of come in here, grab this max spirit. We don't even necessarily need this, so you could take it off and move it somewhere else. But this one is really nice. The Ancestral Guidance, after spending 75 spirit, you'll gain 30% increased damage, and you can spam your spirit. No problem with this build. The more important one that a lot of people use is Heightened Malice, and they use that for the Legendary node to get 45% increased damage when there's a group of 3 or more. That's actually huge, so I definitely want to add this to the build eventually, sooner or later, unless I try another build first. The actual numbers here that you're seeing for attack power doesn't matter too much in this build. As you can see here, we're stacking a ton of things that aren't going to show up here. Armor is very important, and life is very important. Willpower is important too, so nice to get a lot of willpower, but all stats are very important to make sure that you can get those extra bonuses from your Paragon board. I definitely suggest this build over the 12 hours build. There's a good reason that people are hitting level 100 Nightmare Dungeons with it. But I hope this helped. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.